Hind Al-Ansari is with us, and she has a wonderful journey starting in Northwestern University at University City in Qatar. And Northwestern University is one of the great journalism schools of our time. And so they have a journalism school in Qatar, in Doha, at University City. Remember, I told you there were 7 colleges there. 6 of them U.S. colleges: Georgetown, Northwestern, my favorite, Virginia Commonwealth, VCU, obvious reasons. I'm a Rams fan and love doing their basketball games. And so they've got all these, Carnegie Mellon is there. So they got all these U.S. universities there. That was the vision of the Emir's wife some time ago. And I tell you what, you go there, I mean, you go to Northwestern, I mean, you're getting the best journalism, one of the best journalism schools in the world that are there. And I met some of their professors there. It's just a fabulous place. And Hind was also learned by her schooling there how to make films. So now she's a filmmaker. This is pretty cool, man. This is pretty cool. And we need more filmmakers in the U.S., right? To tell you the truth. Hind Al-Ansari, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, John.
So tell us about your short film that you produced in your senior year at Northwestern, what it's about and how we can watch it.
So my film is called Amerika La, which translates to no, like you're not going to America. And it's about a young boy who recently graduated from high school, and he wants to continue his education in New York. But, he has his father standing in his way because his father had a little not so pleasant experience at the airport post 9/11. He was rejected entry to New York, to the U.S., and he was sent back home after a long flight. So the son is in a dilemma whether to listen to his father and continue his education, in the UK, in Qatar, elsewhere, but not the U.S., or actually just turns his back on his dad and go to the U.S. Regardless of what he says.
I tell you what inspired this movie? Like, did you just get up one day and say to yourself, "Oh, I'm going to make a movie"? Because it was showcased at the Cannes Film Festival. What was the original? How'd you come up with the idea?
I would say that it has a lot to do with my own story because back in 2012 was the first time for me to go abroad by myself, and that was for about 4 or 5 months to spend a whole semester at NYU. That was fall of 2012, and before going, it's been really tough with my mother, for example, because she had a lot of negative thoughts, a lot of negative feelings because she's only been to the U.S. once, and she only saw it from a perspective of a tourist, and she only spent some time with us all as a family back in 2007. But again, as a tourist, you don't see much, you don't see that deeply. So she had these preconceived notions about what could a 21-year-old do by herself in a big city like New York as part of university. I think all the images that she had in her head was of all the parties and the drinking and and all that, and she was really worried that I'll be influenced. Being just so raw and young as an undergrad, I could just. Maybe I'll be part of academia, but at the same time I won't be so influenced that I'll just change or be involved in things that she didn't want me to be involved in. So it was really a hard battle. And then always there was always a political side of it. She was afraid of that I would be exposed to Islamophobia. I'll be discriminated against somehow, But I reassured her that it wasn't the case. That I'm strong enough to go pursue my academia. Just focus on that. Yeah, of course, meet people and maybe have fun here and there, but it's nothing that has to do with her concerns. So a lot of it had to do, with my relationship with my mom and, getting permission to go and all that. So I would say that's the gist of it.
So I did my graduate work at New York University, so I know it well. So you went there for 1 semester during undergraduate work, right?
Yes, exactly, for 1 semester.
And so did you stay in an apartment or did you stay in the dorms?
No, I didn't stay at the dorms. So one of the conditions for them to allow me to go was actually to stay in an apartment.
Okay, fun. So just without giving me too much detail, just because I went there, I know the area. So did you stay in Queens and come in on the train, or did you stay near there?
I actually stayed in Central Park South.
Oh, yes.
So I had to take the train every day, which I love, by the way. I love New York subways. Every day to go back and forth, from Central Park South to the NYU area.
That's not bad. Only a couple of stops.
Yeah,
Right,
it was
so
like
good.
20 minutes only, yeah.
Yeah, it's not that bad. All right, excellent. So you go there, you go to NYU, and were you able to tell your mother, like during when you were there, when you get back, like, Mom, New York, great town, people are really nice, there's no discrimination, and I stayed out of trouble, right? Did you send that message back?
I mean, believe it or not, like my relationship with my mom has become much better than, if I had stayed in the country. Like, I don't think our relationship would have progressed as it had, given that I was in NYU for like 4 or 5 months, because I think she's seen a side of me that is not very clear when I was back home, which is, the whole being independent, just being confident in myself, being able to take care of myself while I'm away from the family. And it's, it's a normal to have a parent who grew up in a country that's, back then was like a little bit isolated, not so much exposed to the world and such, to have like those fears. But then at the same time, we used to talk on the phone a lot, and I used to reassure her that, everything was fine. And she knew, like she understood from my tone that I was very happy to be there. And it was the best choice for me, rather than like being in the country. And by the way, I was the only one in my class who did this. I didn't wait for anyone to go with me. Some of the people in my class went to Northwestern's campus in the spring, but I just wanted to do like a different experience. So I think she really appreciated that in me, that I wasn't waiting for anyone to, pursue something with me. I just want to do it on my own, and I think I really grew in her eyes because of that. So.
All right, tell you what, wonderful story. We're with Hind Al-Ansari. She's a PhD candidate in educational reform at the University of Cambridge. She did her undergraduate work at the University of Northwestern University in Qatar, one of the U.S. colleges that are in Doha at University City. There's 7 of them there. And she's also the director of a short film that made the Cannes Film Festival, America La, which we talked about a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your education in Northwestern in Doha and your impact on the media, like particularly social media. Like when you were studying there, what type of an impact did you and some of your students have on social media?
So first of all, I'd like to say that I attribute a lot of my, a lot of parts of my character or my personality to my education back at Northwestern. Like this was, it was a very important stage in my life because, I opened my eyes to a lot of things in the country and the world. Because of back in Northwestern, we learned a lot about critical thinking, about analyzing, about questioning, and this is something that we weren't really exposed to in our local education in Qatar. So that was very important for me in terms of, continuing my pursuit of education. Getting to a PhD level, of course, like you need to have a lot of those skills. And when it comes to social media, I would say that we didn't have like a particular influence, but of course, like a lot of our research had to do with, looking into social media and how people in Qatar, for example, feel more comfortable to, for example, like to go on Twitter and to express their opinions about certain things that you would hear like in certain gatherings, but you're not going to have like that big outreach because like gatherings could be small and big, but at the same time, social media or Twitter, for example, like has a large number of people of Qatar and a variety of opinions that you didn't really think were, existent. So I would say social media was a really important and primary source for our research.
It's just fascinating what they've done there because I think, Hind, what you just said is so riveting because you get a certain perspective of education locally in the Qatar school system, right? But then you go to Northwestern in Doha, right, which is this, same country, and you get a very different perspective because it's a U.S. university and all the standards are the same. So you get a very different perspective. We're with Hind Al-Ansari. She's a doctorate candidate in educational reform. Boy, we need that in the U.S., right? Educational reform at the University of Cambridge. and she's a filmmaker. Now, you began your master level coursework in Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard. So just think about this, listeners. So, young lady goes from, public school in Qatar, then goes to Northwestern University in Qatar, which is there, then takes a semester, goes to New York University, then becomes a filmmaker as a 21-year-old, then goes to Harvard to do Middle Eastern Studies. Okay, so when you got to Harvard, Harvard is Harvard. So what was your reaction to that whole scene?
Well, so unexpected, to be honest. When I applied to 5 universities for 5 master programs, and I just did not expect that Harvard was going to happen until, one day I was with my sister and we got the email that I should check my my accounts and, to get the result. And when we opened the account finally and we saw the acceptance, I was just on cloud 9. It was the last thing that I've ever expected. So, it was amazing. It was one of the best moments of my life, I have to say.
And so compare Boston to New York, right? I hate to put you on the spot, but we have to know this. This is really the big question. You're from Doha. You lived in Boston. You lived in New York. Which is better?
New York for me is number one, no matter
There we
what.
go, baby. I knew I was going to get that out of you. Okay, for all you people in Beantown, really you heard it right here. New York, all over Boston, right? All over it.
Yeah, honestly.
Good answer.
I was so happy that it was so close. It was only a 3-hour train ride.
You go right on the Amtrak.
It wasn't so bad.
All right.
But I would, Boston is the same as Doha without the parental supervision. It's the same things that we do in Doha that I do in Boston. So, but New York is different. It's always going to be number one.
It is different, right? Only one New York City. Great answer. Okay, Hind. Let's talk about your reaction to the blockade, which I've been covering in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, and the UAE. How was the blockade affecting students there, just kind of from a socio-cultural perspective? Because, we always do the economics and the geopolitical ramifications and how it affects Israel. How does it affect students?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because, when it comes to the blockade, people are very involved in discussing the politics and the leaders and such, but they tend to put the people behind. And I think the most important, or the things, or the ones that were mostly impacted, when it comes to the blockade, are the people, as you said, and the students, of course, because we had a lot of Saudi, Emirati students who were part of Education City who were asked to go back home because their degree will no longer be acknowledged, unfortunately. Some Qatari students had to also be kicked out, unfortunately, although a lot of them have reached almost the end of their studies, but they had to go back home, which is very unfortunate. We also have families, businesses, people of all sorts and backgrounds have really been impacted in this. And unfortunately, I think when the leaders made such appalling decision, they really did not take people into consideration. One of my aunts, she lives in Saudi. She's married to a Saudi national, and she just hasn't seen my mom and her sisters for the longest time, and it's very unfortunate. So it's quite sad.
How is that going to get resolved? The fact that your family can't see each other, is there any, can you get a provision? Can you get a waiver? Or are you just stuck there until this thing gets resolved on the geopolitical scale?
There are a lot of ways. Of course, if you have connections, that's one way to somehow leave and come to Qatar. For example, my aunt through connections was able to, because, for those who don't know, the airspace is also cut off. It's under the blockade, air and land space. So what she had to do is take a plane from Dammam in Saudi and travel to Kuwait for a layover, and from there take a plane to come to Qatar. So you can really cross, although it's only a couple of hour plane ride, a couple of hour flight. You can't really do that because of the blockade. So she had to go all the way up to Kuwait, and from Kuwait to Qatar. But that, of course, had to do with some paperwork and permission, stuff like that. I don't think everyone is able to do that easily.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you got the connections, obviously you can do that. But it's a real hardship on just everyday people trying to go and visit family, friends, students just from one country to the next. And the GCC has always been so tight where you could, a lot of people marry from different countries, families, property, houses, nephews, aunts, school students, and you've always, within the GCC, you've always been able to travel freely. And now it's a real humanitarian crisis, and we all hope this gets resolved. I know you're studying for your PhD, Hind, but I've just got to ask you this. As you're studying for your doctorate, and my son's got one, so I know how demanding it is. I don't think I talked to him for months on end while he was involved in that. But while you're doing that, are you still going to maybe make a few more short movies?
I really hope so. I mean, one of the reasons why I did Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard is because I wanted to learn enough about the modern Middle East, from an academic perspective, because I do want to come up with, stories that not only deal with Qatar, but as a region, as for the region as a whole. And for example, I'm interested in the women's status in Lebanon, or the changes for example, in women's progress in Iran ever since the Iranian Revolution. Or maybe look into the question of women, because, for example, in Tunis, I think the women have the best status, the best legal status in the Arab world, which is in Tunis. So I feel like there is so much to look into, but I needed academia to give me a better grounding in order to come up with stories and reach out people from an academic perspective.
I tell you what, unbelievable. All you've done at such a young age now, studying for your PhD. I had no idea that Tunis was the country with the highest degree of rights for women. I got to get you back on. That's a whole separate topic, because I didn't know that. So now I learned something, and now I got to dig into it. But I appreciate your fabulous work and all you continue to do in your career. And I tell you what, I cover politics all day, and so it is inspiring and refreshing for me to be able to talk to a young person like yourself who is getting so much done and getting so much out of this world. And it just gives you hope for a better future, because we get mired in, Trump and politics and John Brennan and Clapper and security clearances and whatever's going on any given day. And for all you Boston Red Sox fans out there, screw you, okay? Because Hind likes New York better. And when we get to the playoffs, Astros are going to beat Boston anyway. So then you're going to be eating your own crumbs. Okay. Thank you, Hind. Thank you for being with us here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Also, Hind is a fan of Amtrak like me. See, she takes Amtrak. Takes the Acela from Boston to New York, right? You people out there that don't want to spend money on Amtrak because, it's subsidizing. Come on, man. Amtrak. You need a national rail system in America if you're going to go to the 21st century. Okay, that's my politics in this segment. Fund Amtrak, damn it.